Welcome back to the Sfas Emes shir on Parshas Acharei Mos Kedoshim. The shir this week once again is being recorded, not in its usual live location in Kilas Chaverim in Yerushalayim, but hopefully it will resume there next week. I'd like to weave together a few thoughts from the Sfas Emes, different places in the Sfas Emes on the two Parshas, hopefully connecting them to one theme. In Parshas Vayikra, Acharei Mos, Vayikra, Perek Yud Ches, Pasuk Aleph, we find, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, that Hashem spoke to Moshe. He said, Daber al bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem ani Hashem Elokeichem, k'maisei Eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem bo lo ta'asu. Do not do like the deeds of Eretz Mitzrayim where you dwelled, u'k'maisei Eretz Canaan, and like the deeds of Eretz Canaan, asher ani meviaschem shama lo ta'asu, that I am bringing you there, you should not do. Uvechukoseihem lo telechu, you should not go in their ways and their customs, but rather, es mishpatai ta'asu, you should do my mishpatim, those laws that we are able to grasp the understanding of, es chukosai tishmaru, to keep the chukos as well, lo leches bohem, to walk in them, ani Hashem Elokeichem. And then it finishes, ushmartem es chukosai ves mishpatai, when you will keep my chukim and my mishpatim, asher yaseh osam ha'odam v'chai bohem. These are the laws that you should do, and you will live in them, ani Hashem. So let's take a look at how the Sfas Emes deals with these psukim in a variety of places. These psukim come immediately before what's known as the Parshas Ha'arayos, the mitzvahs in the Torah, which forbid relations with relatives and other people forbidden to us. It's read on Yom Kippur at Mincha time, and it seems to be an introduction to that parsha. But the Sfas Emes asks, he says, if it's really talking about arayos, about those forbidden relations, why would it be linked to what the Egyptians did and what the Canaanim did? It's also wherever it's done, in any way that it's done. What is this K'masei Eretz Mitzrayim and K'maisei Eretz Canaan? Not to do things like the Mitzrayim did, and not to do things like the Canaanim would do things. Now it's interesting that Rashi mentions that Mitzrayim was the most corrupt of places, and the place where the Jews lived in Mitzrayim was the most corrupt of all. And Canaan also was very, very corrupt, and the places where the Jews were going to be coming to live were the most corrupt of all, which is interesting food for thought on the idea of the opposition of Tumah to Kedusha that's always there. So the Sfas Emes looks at those psukim about K'maisei Eretz Mitzrayim, K'maisei Eretz Canaan, more as a standalone. He explains in the year Tafresh Lamed Ches, he says, K'ma'aseh v'lo maiseh Eretz Mitzrayim mamash. He says Hashem's not commanding us here not to do sins that the Egyptians did, but not to do things in the Egyptian way. Right? He says, Apirush shlo yeh nidmeh shum maiseh isha Yisraeli l'maiseh reshoyim. Nothing the Jew does at any stage in his life should be similar to the way the Egyptians would do things, to the way the Canaanim would do things, asher kol ma'aseyim legashmius bilvad. That everything that they do is simply for the physical reason. Now this just doesn't mean to fulfill physical desires. It can be even just this worldly order and benefit. The idea of even just setting up a society that runs, a political system that runs, but it stops at that. They're doing it for making a better way of life in Olam Hazeh. He says, Avol b'nei Yisrael tzrichim lekadesh kol maasehem. Am Yisrael is supposed to sanctify everything they do, ulhadbikom b'shoresh hachius. Everything they do is meant to be connected to the source of life, of their life force, of the life force of everything. V'likach mehem chius. And by linking their everyday deeds to that source of life, they will derive their life force from that Kedusha that they're connected to. And they'll be living, even though on this planet, but plugged into a very different source. He goes on. He says, "Ki ha'ma'aseh tzarich lios rak letachlis halichas ha'odam ba'avodas habari yisbarach." Everything that we do is supposed to have a unified purpose. The Mesilas Yesharim in the beginning of Perek Aleph talks about Lama yosim maboto umagamoso b'chol asher hu oseh kol yemei chayav, about the person knowing what he is looking towards, what his purpose is in everything he does every day of his life. A unifying principle that takes all the disparate areas of our lives and actions and makes them one. It's a beautiful idea. It's something worth aspiring to. He says, if our tachlis is to be progressing in Avodas Hashem Yisbarach, that unifies everything and that elevates everything, that connects it to a source. Now he says, on the simplest level, the simplest kavana, intention, we could say a person has when he sits down for his meal, he says, this meal is going to keep me alive. This meal is going to sustain my body, give me physical strength, and enable me to do that which Hashem wants me to do in this world. He said that is also an aspect of laleches bohem, that meal that you're eating is part of your progress in the world, of your traveling. It's moving you from a spiritual point A to a spiritual point B. He says, Uma gam letzadik shekol ma'asav l'shem shamayim. Now the tzaddik can take that even further, and the very act of eating is not simply a means to gain strength, but every mouthful will be something which is spiritually significant. So what we're seeing here is that the picture of Avodas Hashem is not a checklist of things that we do and don't do, and otherwise we kind of run our lives like everyone else. As he said, a Jew is supposed to be different in absolutely everything he does. So certainly when it comes to our mitzvahs, we understand what that is. But what about everything else in our life? If we're honest, most people spend most of their waking hours doing things that are similar to everyone else on the world. Working, traveling, taking care of their physical needs, relaxing, doing their hobbies, etc. So for a person who says, Kihem chayenu v'arech yomenu, that the Torah is our life, it is the length of our days, it seems to just be a little sliver of our lifetime, a small compartment of differentiation among the usual human lives that all of us live. So the Pachad Yitzchak, Rav Hutner Zatzal, had a beautiful explanation of what Chazal call everything that's not a mitzvah or not an avera. It's called a dvar reshus. Now, he explained that people oftentimes mistranslate that term that Chazal gave these actions. Reshus sometimes is translated as permission. So divrei reshus would be things that are not a mitzvah, not an avera, and the Torah lets you do what you want. It gives you permission to live your life as you would want. But he says that can't be. The Chovos HaLevavos has a famous principle that he says that there is nothing which is parav or neutral in terms of ruchnius. Everything we do results either in positive spirituality and kedusha or negative spirituality and chilul. The word chilul is related to the idea of cholol, leaving an empty space. So if that is the way we view things, what are divrei reshus? He said the word reshus really is a word of control, right? Like in Shabbos, reshus hayochid, the private domain. Domain is related to the word dominion, that which you rule over. Reshus harabim, that which the public rules over, controls. Even the word reshet, which is a net, is there to control that which is inside of it. Right? That's the idea of a net to control the fish or the hair or whatever it's holding together. So divrei reshus are different than a mitzvah and an avera because when you do a mitzvah, it immediately brings kedusha into the world. When you do an avera, so that immediately brings that chilul Hashem into the world. When you do a dvar reshus, it depends on what your intention is and the way in which you do it. You're in control of how that will be. And therefore, absolutely everything that's done in a Jew's life is something that can be a form of Avodas Hashem, will be elevated and different, even though on the outside when you look at that non-Jew doing the same action, it seems to be exactly the same. There's no mitzvah in the Torah that says thou shalt play tennis. There is no Aveira in the Torah that says thou shalt not play tennis. How the tennis works out depends on you. What is your intention in going to play tennis? How do you play tennis? Are you paying attention that you do it according to the Torah and its guidance in the halachas? And for the purpose of that, he said that's the idea of b'chol d'rachecha da'ehu, to connect with Hashem in everything you do, and to do everything l'shem shamayim. Now here the Sfas Emes brings it to another interesting level. He continues on and says, V'chein b'chol mitzvah she'adam oseh, and also in every mitzvah that a person does, tzarich lios ha'mechuvan lavel al yedei zeh liyoseh kedusha. I believe, and I say this with certain reservations, the Sfas Emes is implying that you can even do mitzvahs in a way of Mitzrayim or in a way of Canaan. Meaning, you're not doing it in order to progress to Kedusha. You're not doing it in order to elevate and connect to in a deeper way to the source of all life. He says, Sheyuchal lahosif b'choles mimadrega l'madrega. You should want to be doing it in order to move on from level to level. Ginyan mitzvah goreres mitzvah. One mitzvah draws the next mitzvah. It's a dynamic process. What should we not be doing? V'lo yianasa ha-mitzvah rak kedei lios niftar michiyuva. That we shouldn't be doing the mitzvah just because I have this list of obligations that I have to check off, and I hate having this pressure of these things I'm obligated to do, so I want to be potter from it. I want to be done. He says, no. Rak adarabba, lizkos ha'idei zel mitzvah acheres. I realize that every mitzvah I do is opening a door to the next mitzvah and enables me to approach the next mitzvah. That's why Chazal said the reward of a mitzvah, schar mitzvah, is the mitzvah itself. That process is what the pasuk refers to as lo leches bohem. That's the true Jewish life of progress, of going on and being able to then v'chai bohem, to draw your very life essence from the mitzvahs and to bring that there. Okay, now what about mitzvahs lo taseh? What about the things that we don't do? Oftentimes we think, okay, when I do a positive mitzvah, when I give tzedakah, when I put on tefillin, when I eat matzah, so I'm progressing. I brought Kedusha in the world, I transformed myself. When there's something I shouldn't do and I don't do it, I view that as maintenance. I maintained the state that I was in. It's not true. In Tafresh Mem Aleph, the Sfas Emes says, Kishoshana ben achochim, that Am Yisrael are like a rose among the thorns. Meaning that they are in this world, they are among the nations who influence us and pressure us to be like them. And we are here, letaken elu hamakomas. By even resisting that negativity, we bring about positive tikkun. He says, Ukamo biprat kol ish Yisrael ein menucha. He says this is true nationally for Am Yisrael in the world, and it's true for every Jewish individual. We don't have rest. We're going to be challenged. And the challenge isn't there to bring us down and just get us to stay where we are. Meeting those challenges helps us progress. V'nikra mahalech. That's why Jews are called walkers. Right? Tzaddikim always know that they have to move on, and they embrace the fact that they're going to be challenged. Okay, now the Sfas Emes in Parshas Re'eh speaks about this idea of being challenged throughout life. The pasuk there says, Re'eh anochi nosin lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. Hashem says, see that I'm placing before you today bracha and klala, blessing and curse. Every day, you have a blessing and curse. So the Sfas Emes says, yes. B'chol eis u'v'chol zman, right? At every time and every day, is shnei drachim b'fnei adam. Because as we said, absolutely everything you do in life can go one way or the other. Okay, so therefore, right, he explains that a person is really always at these crossroads. And a tzaddik goes from one crossroads to the next. And he says this can explain what we find in the Gemara in Masechah Sukkah. It tells us there that in the future, Hashem will take the Yetzer Hara and slaughter it. And the tzaddikim and the Rishonim will both be looking at the Yetzer Hara after his merit's end. It says, tzaddikim nidme lahem kahar. To the tzaddikim, the Yetzer Hara will appear to be like a mountain. Ubochin, and they will cry. Ich yechonu lilochem bo. How are we able to overcome this? Right? And they realized that Hashem helped them to deal with something that seemed so impossible. The Rishonim see the Yetzer Hara as a very fine thread, like a hair. And they also cry and they say, Eich lo yechon lilochem bo. How weren't we able to resist and overcome that little thread? So he says, L'olam yishrak chut hasara. Really, the Yetzer Hara that challenges us in life is always just a thread. But tzaddikim shegovrim olav pogin achar kach b'chutzara acheres. When a tzaddik succeeds in one challenge, there's another thread waiting for him, always. And he has to overcome that one as well. And over time, he says, Ad shemisraben v'nasa kahar. Those threads accumulate till they're a mountain. He says, but the Rasha, he's nishar omed. He doesn't even meet that first challenge. He stays where he is. So therefore, that's why his picture of the Yetzer Hara is a chut hasara, because that's what it was. And he never moved forward. Now, I believe it's possible that that idea that the tzaddikim see the chut hasara eventually adding up to a mountain means that that elevated them. That each of those threads that they conquered helped them go higher and higher. And that is the picture of who and what we are. So we shouldn't view those things that we resist doing that are negative as simply maintenance, but those are also progress and going up and changing and transforming and connecting to Kedusha. And that's why tzaddikim were able to embrace the idea of ein lahem menucha, that they don't have rest. Okay, now let's look at another aspect that makes every aspect of our lives different and infused with Kedusha. In Parshas Kedoshim, the Yotov Reish Lamed Hey, the Sfas Emes says like this. The beginning of the Parsha says, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadoshoni. Hashem says, you should be kadosh because I am kadosh. So the Sfas Emes says in the Medrash and the Zohar Kodesh explains that this is not just a command, hu haftocha gam kein. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is promising us that it's possible. Why? He says, take an example from me. How do we take an example from Hashem? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mechaya hakol. Every item in this world that exists is being given its existence real time now by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every slug, every bird, every bug, every rock, every pond. Afkiyu kadosh v'nivdal mikol. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not contained by the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not limited by the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is elevated and exalted above the world. He says, Ki kadosh ani Hashem. So therefore, we can understand our mission as well. Ki b'koach ha'odom liskadesh b'chol ma'asov. A person might look at that command, Kedoshim to you, and say, how am I supposed to be holy? I live in this world. I got a human body, a human psychology. I'm in a physical world. He says, no. You also are connected integrally to the Teva, but you can also be Kadosh. How? If you'll be misbatel to the Nekuda Pnimius Shebechol Maisa. To realize that in every action you do, there is a spark of godliness. And if that is the main intention in what you do, then you're able to connect to that even while being fully functional and involved in this world. And he explains this is why this mitzvah of Kedoshim to you was said Bahakel, as Rashi says, right? That the Parsha starts off by telling us, Daber el kol adas b'nei Yisrael lemor. Say this to the entire community of Bnei Yisrael. This teaches us that it was said when everyone was gathered together. Why? He says, the ikar kedusha shemachnis atzmo leklal Yisrael. The main connection to Kedusha that we have in this world is by connecting everything that we do by making ourselves part of Klal Yisrael. And Klal Yisrael is not just my community, not even just the Jews in my world, but all Jews that ever were and ever will be. Ki HaKedusha shara b'Klal Yisrael shi Knesset Yisrael. Because the Kedusha in this world rests in Klal Yisrael, which is called Knesset Yisrael, the gathering of Am Yisrael, which is HaKnessia v'Yisasus kol achius l'Hashem Yisborach, that is really gathering together all of the life force that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts into the world. That is the job of Am Yisrael. And when a person really gives themselves over and defines themselves as part of the Klal, then they can access Kedusha. In Tov Reish Mem Gimel, he returns to this theme and says, Aval Kedusha HaKlal Yisrael gavoa b'yoser. The Kedusha of Klal Yisrael is very elevated. That's why when Jews gather together for the sake of heaven, that gathering has an eternity. Because Chalal Hashem Shamayim Kedusha Shar Hashem. The name of Hashem takes residence, so to speak, on that gathering. And there's Kedusha there. He says this explains to us the other side. Ze Ikar HaGolus. The main suffering in the Golus, the main impediment that we have to face in our Golus is Masha Ein Yecholin Lisached. Golus stops us from uniting, not just because we're geographically spread, but Jews have been scattered among Rishoyim. And the influence of those Rishoyim stop Am Yisrael from uniting as they should, the Shem Shamayim, and therefore having the Kedusha rest on them and unite them. And with this he explains a puzzling Gemara. The Gemara talking about the destruction of the two Batei Migdash. So it says, Bayis Rishon, we understand. Bishma Bayis Rishon, Hoya Bahem Avodah Zarah Gila Rayos Ushvichus Domim. They had those three cardinal sins, what's called, of idolatry, forbidden relations, and murder. Avol Bayis Sheni Shoyu Chasidim. But in Bayis Sheni, the people were Chasidim. The word Chasidim means a person who is very, very righteous. And they answer, Meshani, the Gemara answers, Mishum Sinas Chinam, because they had this baseless hatred among them. So Sfas Emes asks, what is the Gemara telling us? If it is telling us that this sin of Sinas Chinam was so great that it brought about the punishment of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the Golus, so why did they say that those people were Hasidim? If they did such a powerful sin, so then these were not righteous people. He says it can't be that that's what they're saying in terms of the punishment. He says no. Sinas Chinam is simply a reality that brings about almost a natural reaction. Sinas Chinam hisibo be'etzem is essentially the reason, if it exists, the Beis HaMikdash cannot be with us. We cannot remain in Eretz Yisrael that way. It's not possible for the Kedusha to be with us and for us to be linked to that Kedusha without Achdus, without oneness. It's not a quid pro quo punishment for the severity of that particular sin. It's simply the reality of our world. So this gives us, first of all, a very positive opening to connect to Kedusha. By having in mind everything we do, even that which I do for myself, I have to, if I view myself as part of the Klal, so everything that I do for myself is also for the benefit of the Klal. And we have to be aware of that and remember it, like the Arizal says, to think of Ahavta l'recha kamocha before davening in the morning. The other is to remember, right, the power of that Achdus among Am Yisrael, and that's where the Kedusha is. They tell a story about Reb David Mitolna, the first Tolna Rebbe, so Yortzite's coming up on the 10th of Iyar, that at one point, for medical reasons, the doctors told him he couldn't go to the mikveh. So he used to push in among the many Hasidim who came to his shul and join the crowd, and he says that I'm toivel tzivishn Yidden. I'm toiveling among Yidden, as it says, mikveh Yisrael Hashem. The Yisrael is the mikveh of Hashem. Kedusha is there among Jews, and the more we can join and connect as we do what we're supposed to do, so then we'll be able to access that Kedusha and bring that level of Kedusha to everything we do each day and help us get out of the spiritual Mitzrayim and avoid being caught into that spiritual Canaan. Wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos.